Peter Bendix declares that the Marlins unlikely to make the playoffs in 2024 off the back of the news that Luis Arraez has been traded. Unfortunately, the Marlins went completely spanked in their first game post Arraez. Arraez also lighting it up in San Diego. Arraez is waving, Bendix is waving the white flag on the 24 season. But what does this timeline look like for this rebuild? Kyle Sielaff joins me to dig into that plus much more on today's Locked On Marlins.
You are Locked On Marlins, your daily podcast on the Miami Marlins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings from England and welcome to Locked On Marlins. It's your daily Marlins pod, of course. I'm your host, Peter Pratt. Hit me up, of course, on X at Miami Marlins_UK. If you are listening to the pod, of course, hit subscribe and leave a review. This is your team every day, and thanks for making Locked On Marlins your first listen. Don't forget there's a YouTube channel. I highly recommend you head on over to there. It's also called Locked On Marlins. Hit subscribe. Enjoy the episodes. And join me in the comments as well. It's all kicking off. Literally, it is kicking off in the comments. I highly recommend you get yourselves in there. Tons to get into on today's episode. Kyle Sielaff joining the show. Before we introduce Kyle and really dig into it, reminder, this episode is sponsored by eBay Motors. And from brakes to exhaust kits and beyond, eBay Motors has over 122 parts to keep your ride or die alive. With all the parts you need at prices you want, it's easy to bring home that big win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply. An eBay guaranteed fit only available to U.S. customers. Kyle Sielaff joining the show from Oakland. Kyle, how we doing, brother?
Peter, I'm doing well. It's great to see you. I know we'd probably enjoy chatting under different circumstances, but I always enjoy joining you. I do, and I tell you this a lot. I think you do an amazing job, and I think this fan base should be very thankful to have you because you keep it honest, you keep it real, and I think people deserve that, man.
Appreciate you, Kyle, and appreciate you taking the time. This is being recorded just before the Game 3 in Oakland, so appreciate Kyle. He's looking fresh, considering it's like 20 to 10 a.m. So, it's been a long couple of days. For this episode, we're going to focus our time on still a bit more Arraez trade fallout, equally starting to kind of look ahead because the strategic direction is formulating. And so I think it's right to ask the questions around what is this timeline going to look like? And equally, is there any untouchables? What could happen in the next year or so? So tons to get into. Kyle, what was your take, though? The Arraez trade drops, the timing of the trade. I think that for me is firstly the very interesting element. May 3rd/4th, depending on time zones. It's an early one for a player like Arraez to be moved, but your reaction to the actual deal dropping at that point in time?
It's a really good question, Peter. And I guess I would just start by saying the same exact thing that I tweeted the other day. It really sucked. Friday night really sucked because that's an amazing human being, more than he is a baseball player. And the reason I think fans are so upset by it is because of the human being that he is. He was such an amazing player. And in a little over a year, he became kind of the face of the franchise and the big lovable guy that would give anybody his time of day. And you just wanted to wrap your arms around him. And it's a guy you'd love to just, call yours forever. And it's not the nature of the beast. It's not how this industry works. And I genuinely believe, and from speaking with Peter Bendix yesterday, that the Marlins felt like at this juncture, and given the way things were going, don't make any mistake about it, the record dictated what transpired here with Luis Arraez. The Padres felt like they had a need, and the Marlins felt like they got the best package possible, and that was available to them. And I know that is subject to the eyes of the beholder, and there will be people that will say that they got fleeced. Others will say the Marlins fleeced the Padres. And the bottom line is we won't know for a few years because of, in particular, the young man Dylan Head, who is the prize prospect in the deal. He's 19 years old, and it will take him a while to get to the big leagues, but it'll be some time before we can say whether it was a good or a bad trade.
Yeah, for sure. It's the type of trade that evaluation will be, 5 years plus, I think, until you can make a true evaluation. I mean, heck, we're still evaluating the Sixto Sanchez JT Realmuto trade, so that one's still not closed. He's going this evening, by the way, or this afternoon for the Marlins. But Kyle, I think it's a very interesting one because Arraez is an elite player. AJ Preller specifically called it out. We've acquired an elite player, and that's my view of Arraez. And you've got an elite human in there as well. Elite player, elite humans. They're hard to find in baseball, to be honest with you. And the Marlins absolutely nailed on one. They had to move actually the same thing. They had to move an elite player and an elite human in Pablo Lopez to go and get Luis Arraez. So it's tough. The situation is difficult. However, the history here is the problem because it feels like we've been down this path many times with the Marlins where they've made this type of deal and it feels like it's blown up in their face more often than not. And that's where I think the fan base is maybe a little bit nervous on that one. What would you say to the fans who are feeling that way at this point?
I don't know if there's anything I can say, Peter. And this has nothing to do with me, but I have been a fan of this team for a really long time. I've always enjoyed watching the Marlins, and I think we all understand the history. And when you said many times over it's blown up, there's probably an argument to be made, and I don't know if it's even an argument that every time that they have found success, it's unfortunately gone south after that. And the fan base is jaded by that, and nobody wants to lose. Losing is not fun.
No.
And the fans have every right in the world to be upset. Fans are fanatics. They enjoy their team. They love their team. And the reason they're upset is because they're not winning. And I think sometimes we often forget that fans take it personal when the team loses, because you feel emotionally invested into it, man. Fans deserve to feel a certain way. They can feel any way they want because ultimately they are the ones that invest their time and money into a product. And they have every right in the world to be upset when things aren't going well. Peter, I would say, hell, no. I was talking to somebody yesterday, and I won't get on a rant. There's amazing people in this organization. I promise you, nobody enjoys losing, dude. Losing is not fun. It's literally not good for the bottom line to lose. There's some amazing people in this organization that want to see it through. And people will get on me about this, but I promise you, Marlins principal owner Bruce Sherman loves winning. I promise you, if we want to get him on right now, he would probably tell you last year was more enjoyable than this year, right? Losing is not fun. But back to the main point of this, this has happened, right, over and over again, and that is the feeling. And the one thing that people don't want to hear, that is unfortunately, I'm going to say right now, is that it's going to take time, and fans are not patient, and they have every right in the world to not be patient, right? Because they feel like they've been burned over and over again. And that's true. But I would say this, I believe in Peter Bendix, and I'm going to stand up for that. I'm going to stand up for what I believe in, and every single fan has a right to stand up for what they believe in. I have gotten an opportunity to know Peter over these last 6 months. I think he's hired some amazing people that deserve an opportunity to do this. And the way that they're going to do this is the same way that the fans have been told over and over and over again that hasn't worked, right? But that you have to be patient. And patience is a really, really tough thing to tell fans. So we could probably go a million different directions with that, but I have no talking points, man. I am a fan of this game. I love baseball. I genuinely love baseball. I love this team. I think there's some amazing fans, and I just want to see them win.
For sure. To your point, yeah, we could absolutely go in many different directions here. And I think, to be honest with you, it's great to hear. And this is what, maybe isn't always totally clear or apparent, right? Is Kyle Sielaff fan of the Marlins, fundamentally. You know what I mean? And you see it the same way. You have a role to do, and you're part of, the Marlins organization in maybe a different way that other fans aren't, but, you feel it the same, which is heartening. Kyle, what I wanted to ask you, getting your sense here, when Peter Bendix is talking about the long-term aspirations, I think this is the point. This is kind of where you're going. It's going to take time. I think the fan base then starts to think about, and I'm thinking about, okay, what's the ask? What do we think the timeline looks like here for this to become, the big league product starts to be in that sustainable window, let's say, of success? And so Has Peter ever kind of given an indication of like a timeline as such that you've heard him talk about? I've heard about the future success, but I don't know how long we're looking for this one.
Peter, I would say it's a really fair question. And I would go back to the fans and I would say every fan has the right to ask that question. But I also, for me personally, I mean, and I'm not going to pretend I know, but I think it's also unfair. Like, because here's the problem. If Peter were to come out and say, I plan on competing in 2 years and they are not competitive in 2 years, then in the eyes of the fan, that's a failure. And maybe it takes 3 or 4. But if he comes out and says, you know what, this is going to take 5 years, fans aren't going to want to hear that. And I don't know if he genuinely, and I mean this in a good way, like has said, okay, I'm going to do everything in a strategic way that I plan on being good in 2029. I don't really think that's how presidents of baseball operations think. I genuinely believe in those shoes, you do the best you can to compete every single year. But again, to me, if he says we're going to be good next year and they're not, obviously that's going to create outrage. People will also be upset if he says it's going to take a half decade for me to turn this thing around. Because again, there is no patience in fans, and fans have the right to be impatient because they genuinely love a team, right? And they get hurt when they lose. So I think, and this will upset people, I think the answer is we don't know. I'm not sure Peter knows, because he is going to do everything in his power to make this team as good as he can, as quickly as he can. Yeah. And that's exactly what he's going to do. And I would offer this, and you know this, Peter, that's going to mean that there will be additional pieces on this roster and players that fans like that will be dealt, right? Because there is no farm system right now. It depends on where you want to look, but a lot of people have them as 28th or 29th in all of Major League Baseball in terms of talent in the farm system. There are some young kids I'm really excited about. I would love to see them. I think we're going to see them sooner rather than later. I could see Troy Johnston getting 300 or 400 plate appearances. Does Victor Mesa Jr. make it here? Does Griffin Conine make it here? Does Tristan Gray get a shot? That excites me at this juncture when you are 9-26 and it does look pretty bleak. They might see what they have in some of those young kids. But I do think, to answer your question in total transparency and honesty, there is not a good answer. And I think any answer that I were to give would probably upset people one way or another. But I think I'm just genuinely trying to be honest about the situation. And I know that's kind of tough.
Yeah, for sure. We don't want to upset anyone on this podcast, by the way. We never try to upset anyone. So I just wanted to call that one out. So let's not upset anyone. Let's hit the first ad. And then I think there's two elements to this. I wanted to just kind of get your sense of the feeling. You're around the guys. You've been around them yesterday. There's a rain delay as well, which maybe has helped you to spend a little bit more time than maybe you would have done at that point. So I'm interested to get your take on the feeling around the clubhouse, post Arraez trade, considering who he was as a player and as a leader. Equally, and then maybe think about what else could happen maybe the rest of the way in 2024. But before we do that, let's let you know about our good friends, of course, over at eBay Motors. Yes, sir. And the producer has got the sexy graphics up. And passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. It includes superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether into speed, power, or style. eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at prices you want, it's easy to make your MVP, the car, your MVP, and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit. Only available to U.S. customers. All right, guys, welcome back to Locked On Marlins with me, Peter Pratt, and Kyle Sielaff. Unfortunately, Kyle, on yesterday's game, Saturday, straight after the trade was made, unfortunately, it was not the result the Marlins were looking for on the field either. But before we dig into that, just wanted to ask you the vibe you get of the guys around. We saw a few interviews, saw Jazz interviewed Sandy, Brian De La Cruz, multiple guys asked about their feedback that are, Arraez no longer with the organization, and what impacts that's going to have, I guess. So, there's that element. Equally, Peter Bendix signaling, I don't think we're going to make the playoffs this season. So how can the guys be feeling in the clubhouse at this point? Or what's your sense from the guys that remain? And equally, considering what could happen, how does that impact them kind of mentally, maybe even performance-wise as well, I guess? So that's a 7-part question.
Yeah.
So try your best with that one.
I would say let's go back to 2 days ago, Friday, when the trade was reported, 10 or 15 minutes before, or I guess maybe it leaked in the media or something, like 10 or 15 minutes before first pitch. And to my understanding, I don't think Arraez had any idea. Nobody knew, really.
No.
I would start there, and I think there was a sense of shock because it was May 3rd, right? And they were coming off of winning 3 in a row, and now coming out west and seeing if they can build upon a little something and maybe start to turn things around a little bit to be more competitive throughout the summer. And obviously that came down. So I would say Friday's game, the 3-1 loss, I guess it was, there was some shock. I think there was emotion during the game. You saw the hugs and the handshakes, and Arraez, you could just see him there in his Marlins jersey. No, he wasn't going to get into the game. It was not official. I guess in theory he could have, but he's just sitting there. It's like you're looking at him for the last time in a Marlins jersey. And I think it is genuinely fair to say that the emotion carried over into yesterday. I'm sure there was frustration. These guys are humans like we are. I think they are unbelievable humans and amazing athletes, but they are emotional. They tick the same way we do. And I'm sure that yesterday still stunk. But here's one thing I do know is that Skip Schumacher is one of the best men I've ever met in this game, and he will refuse to let that linger. They will, and I'm sure I'll be catching the bus here in about 40 minutes. I promise you they've already been out there this morning taking early work, taking ground balls, because the coaching staff takes it personally, including the manager, Skip, when things are not going well. They genuinely believe every day that they're coming to the ballpark, it does not matter who's in the clubhouse, that they're going to win. And that, by the way, is a winning culture. And I understand that things are not going well, but you hope that attitude and mentality now will lead to fruits of the labor later, when some of these young kids, I don't know, maybe a Bruhan or a Gordon, like 2024 didn't go well, but gosh, I learned a lot. Right. And who knows if they're a part of this thing moving forward. But I guess my long answer would be I don't know what's going to happen today, but I do think you'll see a better team today. I think they have started to get over the shock of their teammate and their leader and kind of the heartbeat of the team being dealt, because that is a vicious part of this business. I think it was a prudent move by Peter. I guess we can get into that more or whatever, but they'll be okay. They're going to keep working hard, and there's going to be an opportunity for some young players to see and to prove to this organization that they are capable of being a part of this thing moving forward, which will be, in my opinion, fun to watch. For some, maybe not.
Yeah, for sure. It depends. I mean, we've been through rebuilds before, and even when things aren't great, wins and losses wise, there's always things to hope for. There's always players, stories, things that happen that you'll end up rooting for. I felt the same about Dane Myers when he was promoted the other day. And next thing is, it felt like he gave you a little boost all of a sudden, and then he starts hitting, and then okay, the record looks crap, but Dane Myers is here, guys, and it gets that little kind of, the fan base can rally. I think that in the early part of the season, I think that was kind of what was missing a little bit, where the record and the games weren't going great. It felt like there wasn't quite any stories to rally behind in some ways, and it just was all about the losses. And so I love that little injection of, new personality, new player with Dane Myers. So I think that's going to be sprinkled. Clearly, that'll be sprinkled through the rest of this season, right, Kyle? Where, further moves will be made. Other guys will have opportunities. And there's guys in AAA that I think a lot of people have been calling to see an opportunity for some time. You've mentioned a few of them already. Troy Johnson definitely being one of them. Victor Mesa Jr., who was on this podcast in the summer, he's ready to go. Victor's ready to rock and roll too, and he's performing well. So, it's going to be a different year. The record isn't going to be amazing, clearly, but there's going to be storylines and players that Marlins fans can get behind. I'm confident of that. I think the question comes, though, Kyle, is how deep is this going to go, and how quickly is kind of what's on my mind at this point. We're in early May. One of the best guys has already been moved. Is this, how deep and quick could this get, I guess, is what's on my mind. What about you?
It's a great question, and I think it's contingent upon needs league-wide. I would say let's take a Jesus Luzardo, for example. Obviously, he now
Yeah.
for over a year has been subject to trade speculation. If he comes back healthy, and let's say he puts together 2 or 3 really good starts, and pick a name out of a hat, the Milwaukee Brewers lose their ace, there will be a phone call, right? Like
Oh, yeah.
that I think within maybe a different scope, but maybe the Padres were feeling that they wanted the guy who could get on base, good contact hitter, guy that could spark the team. And they saw the Marlins, they saw the way things are going. AJ Preller picked up the phone, called Peter Bendix, and they got a deal done. And again, I've read some stuff. A lot of people think that it was a very good move for both sides. Obviously, one is going to be more impactful immediately than the other, and we understand that. I think of a Tanner Scott. If somebody loses a closer, maybe he ends up back in Baltimore if they have a need in a bullpen. I'm just picking names out of a hat, but this stuff, it doesn't have to wait to the deadline. And think about it this way too. The longer the Marlins wait, the less leverage or the more leverage they start to lose. As you near a deadline, and maybe you're like, we just want to move him to see what we can get, you're probably not going to get the best available package. So it is prudent to move them sooner rather than later. If teams league-wide do have needs, you do see if there is a fit sooner rather than later, because maybe you do get more than what you were expecting. So we Arraez, Luzardo, Tanner Scott. Here's another interesting name for me who I think might get the biggest haul back right now would be Edward Cabrera. I know we're going to talk about untouchables, and I don't want let me tease it. The responsibility of a general manager and a president of baseball operations is to pick up the phone when somebody calls. I don't care who you are. There are no untouchables. You take every phone call because you don't know what somebody might be willing to offer you for a player. So I think that's where the Marlins are at. And I know that might frustrate people to hear that, but I do think that, again, like I told you when we said hello, honesty and transparency is important. And the Marlins and Peter Bendix, and I would go back to one thing that we talked about, Peter. I know it's never worked. And let's be honest about that. Every single time that the fans have been told we are rebuilding, this is going to be a long-term process and plan. And what do we hear? That the goal is to have sustainable winning year over year. Okay, in my opinion, the only way to do that is to build a farm system. Again, we have heard that over and over again. And I will not ask for fans' patience, because they don't deserve they have every right to feel none. But I just genuinely do believe that Peter Bendix, Rachel Balkovec, who I spoke with somebody the other day, and they said she's never done that job, but she is one of the most fearless and relentless hard workers they've ever seen, and they think she's going to do amazing. Gabe Kapler, remember 10 years ago, was a big part of why the Dodgers have all the success that they have now. Vinesh Kanthan, Frankie Pillieri. There's some amazing people in this organization. And again, people don't care about them right now because they just want to see the team win at the big league level, and they're not. And that is, I don't think indefensible is too harsh, but like, I can't sit here and rationalize why they're not winning on the field. Like, they're not good enough right now, and things are going to change. Players will continue to be traded, and this is going to take some time. But I will stand by Peter and his crew. I know I'm an employee of the organization. I get that, but I will stand by them. They deserve an opportunity to do this their way, and they're going to get that opportunity.
I think the really interesting thing recently has been the clarity maybe that the fans have received. It felt a little bit uncertain what was going to happen. And I feel like this Arraez move really signals, because to me, when you talk about one eye to the present, one eye to the future, it by the very nature of that sentence is a mixed message. And I feel like the move really signals to the fan base, this is the clear direction we're taking. And for me, that was kind of what was missing a touch, to be honest with you. I think it was a clear strategy and a clear delivery to the fans. And I think now they absolutely understand. And they'll make peace with that. And I've talked about on this show many, many times, like, come out and tell the fans what is actually happening. And then It'll be painful for a while, but they'll get on board. Soon enough, everyone will be absolutely all over the Marlins farm system. They'll be waxing lyrical about it, and that'll be their guilty pleasure for a period. They'll be interested in what's happening in Jupiter or Pensacola, whatever it might be, because that's just, that's just the cycle here. But let me ask you quickly, though, Kyle, could you see, I know Arraez's big piece of this club now, he only had a year plus of control, let's say. Could you see a situation where someone is extended all of a sudden, where actually the Marlins think, do you know what? And Peter Bendix thinks, maybe there's someone we'd like to build around and commit to, get something done. And I wonder what impact that could make to the fans as well. I'm thinking maybe like a Jazz, maybe even a Yuri Perez, to be honest with you, even obviously much younger. But, could you see something like that maybe in the works here that could kind of, maybe that, to me, that is a tip of the cap to the present and the future in some ways. I don't know. What about you?
Yeah, well, I think it's a fair question, Peter. You say Jazz's name. I think that one would hurt this fan base, and I'm not suggesting he's going to get traded, but I promise you, Peter will take phone calls on him in the next few months. A guy that would be a free agent after 2026. But again, you take any phone call. I think it's totally fair to potentially suggest that maybe there would be an extension in the works for Yuri in the next year or so, right? Like that might be a prudent time to try to get that done. He's coming off injury. Remember, Sandy, I don't want to misspeak, but I think he signed the largest pre-arb deal ever in Major League history or something. Is that right? Like you could certainly foresee a situation where maybe they buy Yuri out of a couple of years of arbitration and sign him to a 5 or 6 year deal or something. I genuinely don't believe they're opposed to spending money, but I guess the thing that frustrates me a little bit, and this is probably deviating a little bit, and then I'll get back to it, is everybody that, and again, I'm happy to go on Twitter and I'll share what I believe, and others can say that it's nonsense and you're full of it, and you're just saying what the organization wants you to say. That's not true. I don't really have talking points, but like the people that suggest they should have just spent a ton of money in the offseason, it really frustrates me because I think there's a perfect recent example in the New York Mets. Without a farm system, they tried to buy a World Series and it didn't work. People have quickly forgotten that the Houston Astros and the Atlanta Braves and the Los Angeles Dodgers have gotten to where they are now with a farm system, right? Like, it's easy to forget that when you see, the Braves signing all these guys. But let me circle back around. Once Peter and his crew have an opportunity to do this their way, and we all hope it works. There's never a guarantee that anything's going to work. I can assure you that they will entertain anything to make this team good long term. And if that means signing, and obviously there is a precedent, the Braves continue to sign amazing MVP caliber players to team friendly extensions. There's a precedent there. It's not like they're overpaying. I promise you the Marlins will entertain that, but they need to get to that spot first. And does that mean maybe going to a Jake Berger now in the next year or so and saying, hey, you know what? We love your bat. We see you as a first baseman here for a while. Here's, that's a guy that has blown out his Achilles a half dozen times or whatever. They're not even being funny like that. That's a guy who could get some life-changing money, and maybe that would be at a discount. You entertain all of that stuff. So they just have to get to that spot, man. Like it is going to take some time, but they need to get there. And nothing is off the table. And nothing, whether it's now, next year, but yeah, nothing's off the table. So we'll see where it goes.
One final one, Kyle, because I know you've got to get yourself ready for the team bus and get yourself down to the Coliseum, I guess. But one final one, it's still only early May. Arraez is gone. We'll wait to see how this plays out in terms of who else is maybe moved along the way. There's a few obvious candidates linked to their contractual situation. But taking all that away, what are you looking forward to rest of the way in 2024? I mean, you literally watch every pitch. You have to, by the very nature. And so you'll be watching very closely. A few fans may be tuning out. But from your perspective, what are you watching for and looking for the rest of the way in 24?
I would say the same thing I looked for when I was younger and watching baseball and maybe watching struggling teams. It's getting a glimmer of hope from young kids that could be a part of it moving forward. And I do think sooner rather than later in the next month or so, and depending on how things go. I mean, truthfully, they'll still be in a tough spot a month from now unless they win 25 games in a row, right? Like it's very difficult to do, and we understand that. I look forward to that glimmer of hope and something that the fans can latch on, and and again, they may not, because obviously they're frustrated right now, and I understand. They have every right in the world to be. I cannot stress that enough. I guess it does make me a little sad when people reach out to me on social media and they're like, like you're wrong. Like, again, I'm a fan. Like I want to see, I guess I just look forward to young kids that make you think like that could be our guy. Right. And that doesn't mean that 10 years from now, they'll still be with the organization. Because that doesn't really happen in this game a whole lot anymore. I think fan bases are a little bit jaded by that. More often than not, you will see young, talented players get dealt. And there are obviously some big name teams that will pay to keep them. And who knows? I think about Alonso. Is Pete Alonso a Met next year? They would go nuts up there if he wasn't, right? But that is kind of the nature of the beast. That's the game we play today. But again, I'm sorry I get so sidetracked, but I'm rambling. But I just look forward to young players coming up, man. I want to see. I think it would be an amazing story if Griffin Conine came up and hit a homer as a Marlin. That would be really, really cool to me. I would love to. Not just that. I'd love to see him have success, man, with his dad watching him. Tristan Gray has an opportunity to potentially be an impact player if he cuts down on the swing and miss a little bit. What does Troy Johnston look like? A guy that I thought maybe could have gotten an opportunity last year. He was not picked up in the Rule 5 draft. He's back in the system. He might have an opportunity. And then I was sitting on the bus yesterday thinking about a rotation that features, and even if you remove Luzardo, who could be dealt, it's anchored by Sandy, Yuri, and Max Meyer next year. I'm not saying they're going to be good, but I'm like, damn, dude, that'd be awesome. Like, I'd love to see 3 healthy guys like that pitching for this team. There would be 29 other teams jealous with that top 3 in the rotation. Like, that's a lot of stuff that I think about, stuff that I look forward to. I love watching young people and young men fulfill their dreams, because they're in a position that we'll never be in. Obviously, we're fossils now, Peter. We're screwed, and many other people are too. But people that have worked their tail off their entire life to get this opportunity, I enjoy that. I'm a fan of this team. I believe in Peter Bendix, and I'll wrap it up by saying this. I understand everybody's frustration. I hope this message is clear enough that every single fan has a right to be frustrated. If you're going to stop coming out to the ballpark as much as you used to, I understand. But I do hope that if you have an opportunity to bring your family out and just come join us, make a memory, and you just stick by them. I know you've been burnt by it a ton of times. I believe in Peter, and I'll leave it at that. And I will, and we'll see how this whole thing plays out.
You're a gent. Thank you so much for taking the time. I think the final sentence, I may actually just add it to my Twitter bio now. I believe in Peter. That's what I'm going to go with. I mean, it's coincidental, maybe. There's multiple Peters in Marlin's sphere at this point. So I'm just going to ride his coattails with this one. That's Kyle Sielaff joining from Oakland pre-game on Sunday. Sixto Sanchez going for the Marlins in Game 3 as they look to avoid the sweep. Thanks for joining me on Locked On Marlins and making it first listen of the day, guys. Of course, we'll be back on Monday, so tomorrow. And the UK GOAT, Sean Barrett, I believe, is queued up for that one. We'll be getting Sean Barrett's fan view on this one from the UK. So 2 UK guys digging into it tomorrow. Look forward to seeing you then.